My name is Rachel, I'm 29 years old, and I work as a wedding photographer in Boston. The strange part of my job is that I've taken thousands of pictures of smiling brides standing proudly beside their parents. And every time I do, there's a small sting inside me. It reminds me that when it was my turn to walk down the aisle, my own parents decided not to be there. They called my wedding a trivial event for someone at the bottom and chose to go to Hawaii with my sister Emily instead. That choice burned a hole in me, one I'll probably never forget. When they finally called me a week later, it wasn't to congratulate MIT, it was because they needed something. That moment taught me more about boundaries, self-respect, and the meaning of family than years of living with them ever had. But let me take you back. I grew up in Massachusetts, in a nice, upper-middle-class neighborhood that looked picture-perfect from the outside. Our house was a 2-story colonial with a shiny white fence and a lawn so neat it could have been from a magazine. People driving by probably thought we were the ideal family. Inside, though, it was a different story. There was a clear order of importance in our home, a ladder everyone knew. At the very top were my parents, Mark and Susan. Dad was a corporate lawyer, sharp, intimidating, and proud of it. Mum worked as a hospital administrator and cared more about appearances than emotions. Right beneath them was my older sister Emily, 6 years older than me, their golden child who never made mistakes in their eyes. And then there was me, the afterthought, the disappointment, the one who always seemed to fall short no matter what I did. Even as a kid, I knew where I stood. When Emily brought home straight A's, her report card was displayed proudly on the fridge for weeks. When I managed the same thing, Mum would nod quickly and say, "That's expected, Rachel. Nothing special." When Emily got accepted into medical school, my parents threw a huge celebration with friends, champagne, and endless praise. When I graduated with honors in fine arts, they skipped the ceremony because it clashed with a country club event. That's the pattern I lived with. Whenever I showed Dad my photography projects, his response was always the same. Photography is just a hobby, he'd dismiss with a wave. That's not a real career path. Think of something practical. And with that, he'd shut the conversation down. Emily walked the exact path they wanted for her prem studies, Ivy League. Medical school, a prestigious residency. By 35, she was a surgeon, married to another doctor, with 2 perfect kids, living just a few blocks away from my parents. Every Sunday, they gathered for dinner at my parents' house, the little dynasty my mum and dad had dreamed of. Meanwhile, my life was nothing like theirs, and to my parents, that meant I was nothing but a disappointment. My love for photography started in high school. I can still remember the day it clicked for me. My art teacher, Mrs. Carter, lent me an old Nikon camera for a class project. I still remember holding it for the first time, peering through the viewfinder, and feeling something wake up inside me. It was like a spark. Suddenly, I realized I could capture emotions, memories, and entire stories in one single frame. I spent hours in the school darkroom, watching photos slowly come to life in the developing trays. It was magic to me. When I told my parents I wanted to study photography in college, that spark was nearly crushed on the spot. Dad slammed the idea immediately. "We are not paying for you to waste 4 years taking pictures." Mum tried to soften it, but she wasn't much better. "Maybe you could study business with photography as a minor. That way you'll have something safe to fall back on." They talked about me as if I wasn't sitting there. In the end, the compromise was that I'd attend the state university on a partial scholarship, double major in business and fine arts. They agreed to cover the remaining tuition only if I kept my GPA above 3.5. I pushed myself harder than ever before, juggling 2 majors, while also working wedding photography gigs on weekends to build my portfolio. My roommate Hannah used to find me at 3 in the morning, hunched over my laptop, editing photos after finishing business assignments. She once said, "Rachel, most people pick one thing to be great at. You're killing yourself trying to please everybody." She was right, but I kept at it anyway, because I thought, maybe, just maybe if I proved myself enough, my parents would finally see my worth. That hope took its hardest hit in my junior year. I won a big regional photography award, one that actually got me featured in the local paper. Excited beyond words, I clipped the article and mailed it to my parents, thinking this was finally my moment. That night, Mum called me. "I saw your little article," she said flatly. "That's nice. But did you see that Emily just published her research in the New England Journal of Medicine? We sent you the link last week." I had seen it. I had even sent Emily a congratulatory bouquet. But in return, my achievement wasn't even acknowledged beyond that one casual "that's nice." It was like a punch in the stomach. After college, I worked at a marketing firm. It wasn't my dream, but it was the responsible choice to keep my parents happy while I built my photography business on the side. For 3 years, I saved every dime, lived in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, and worked practically 7 days a week. Finally, I had enough clients and money saved to take the leap, quit the firm, and go full-time into photography. The day I told my parents, Dad looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're throwing away a stable income to chase a pipe dream. Don't come crying to us when it fails." But it didn't fail. Over the next 7 years, I built a business I was proud of. My calendar was packed months ahead. I hired 2 assistant photographers to handle the workload, and I even bought a small condo of my own. My work started winning international awards, but to my parents, it was like none of it existed. At family gatherings, Mum would brag about Emily's surgeries, research, and children, but when she introduced me, I was just my younger daughter with no mention of my career. Once, I overheard her telling a friend at her bridge club that I was still figuring things out, like I was some lost 20-year-old instead of a successful business owner. It was during one of those wedding shoots that I met David, the man who would later become my husband. He was the best man that day, and I noticed him right away, not just because he was handsome, but because of how he carried himself. He cracked jokes to calm the nervous groom, helped an elderly guest make it to her seat, and even entertained restless kids during the reception. His warmth stood out so much that I found myself snapping extra photos of him, even though he wasn't the groom. When I was packing up, he walked over with a smile that made me nervous, in a good way. "So you're the one who sees everything," he said. I laughed, replying, "That's my job, to notice the little moments other people miss." He grinned and handed me his phone number. "Well, I noticed you too. Call me if you ever want to be on the other side of the camera." David turned out to be an elementary school teacher who loved his work with the same passion I had for photography. On our first date, he spoke about his 4th graders with such care and joy that I knew he was special. He believed in nurturing kids' strengths rather than forcing them into a single mold, which was the complete opposite of how my parents had raised me. 6 months later, when I introduced him to them, Dad barely shook his hand, and Mum made little comments about how teachers were underpaid. On the drive home, David asked, "Why do they seem disappointed in me already?" I told him, "It's not you. They'd react this way to anyone who isn't a doctor, lawyer, or CEO." He squeezed my hand and said, "That's their loss. They're missing out on a wonderful daughter." That moment sealed it for me. I knew he was the man I wanted to spend my life with. As our relationship grew, I kept contact with my parents at a bare minimum. Short phone calls once a month, holiday visits that felt more like obligations than family time. The truth was, I had stopped looking for their approval and started focusing on the life I wanted with David. When he proposed one crisp autumn morning during a hike to a waterfall, I didn't need anything more. No fancy setups, no hidden photographers. Just the two of us, surrounded by the bright reds and golds of fall, with David kneeling on damp ground, holding a simple but beautiful ring. Tears rolled down my face as I said yes. He whispered, "I know I'm just a teacher, but I promise I'll support your dreams the way you've supported mine." I shook my head and told him, "You're never just anything. You're everything I want." That proposal was perfect because it was real. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly chosen, seen, and loved for exactly who I was. Once David and I were engaged, we both agreed that our wedding would be small and simple, focused on love instead of impressing people. Working as a wedding photographer, I had seen so many couples stressed out over flowers, menus, and decorations, forgetting what the day was truly about. I didn't want that. I wanted something real, something that reflected who we were. We picked a botanical garden for the ceremony, a quiet place filled with green trees, colorful flowers, and a peaceful energy that felt right for us. We set the guest list at around 70 people, close friends and family, who mattered to us. Nothing more. The catering was simple, just our favorite comfort foods. The flowers came from a small local shop, and a pastry chef friend offered to make our cake as her gift. My photographer friends even gave me a huge discount, eager to capture the day for me. David's artistic sister, Anna, handmade the invitations, pressing flowers onto cream-colored cards that matched our garden theme. One weekend we sat together, at the kitchen table, drinking wine and laughing while we addressed envelopes. David looked over at me, smiling. "Only for people from your family?" he asked, noticing how small the stack was for my side. "Yeah," I said softly. "Aunt Linda and Uncle Tom, plus my 2 cousins. And of course, my parents and Emily's family, though I doubt they'll come." "You should still invite them," he said gently. "Give them the chance to surprise you." I knew he was right. Deep down, I still wanted my parents there, even if I told myself I didn't care anymore. Maybe, just maybe, they'd see that. This day was too important to skip. I saved the hardest call for last. After phoning all my friends and relatives with the happy news, I dialed my parents. Mom answered, sounding distracted. "Hello, Rachel. This isn't a good time. We're leaving for a fundraiser." "This'll only take a minute, Mom," I said quickly. "I wanted to tell you that David proposed. We're getting married in June." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order. Have you set a date?" "Yes, June 12th. We're planning a garden ceremony, small and intimate." "June is a busy month," she said. "Your father has a conference, and Emily is presenting at a medical symposium. The kids also have their end-of-year recital." "It's 6 months away," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I'd really love for you all to be there. We'll see what we can do," she answered, her tone making it sound like an obligation. "Send us the details." I hung up feeling heavy, but I still included them on the official invitations, adding a handwritten note explaining how much it would mean to have them there. Weeks passed without a reply. In March, 3 months before the wedding, I decided to visit them in person. I hadn't been inside their house in almost a year, and nothing had changed. The rooms looked more like museum exhibits than places to live formal furniture you couldn't touch. A living room where kids were never allowed to play. On the wall were rows of framed photos of Emily's achievements, her white coat ceremony, her medical degree, her kids' school awards. Among all that, only one small photo of me my high school graduation sat in a corner. Mum served me tea in fancy china cups, as if I were a guest, not her daughter. Dad entered, sitting straight in his leather chair like he always did, looking at me with cool eyes. "We got your invitation," Mum began after some awkward small talk about the weather. "But I'm afraid we have a conflict." "What conflict?" I asked. "The date's been set for months." Dad cleared his throat. Your sister's family is visiting that weekend. We've already made plans. Can't they come the weekend before or after? This is my wedding day." Dad's face hardened. "Rachel, let's be honest. Emily is a busy surgeon with important responsibilities. Her kids have full schedules too. They can't just rearrange everything for what is, frankly, a trivial event for someone in your position." "My position," I repeated, my voice shaking. "What your father means," Mom cut in smoothly, "is that while this is important to you, Emily's work has to come first. She saves lives, and I just take pictures," I asked flatly. "Exactly," Dad said, missing the sarcasm completely. "Emily has built something meaningful. She can't be expected to disrupt that for this." "This is my wedding," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm your daughter, too." "Of course you are," Mum said with a tight smile. "But your little garden ceremony is hardly the event of the century. Maybe if you had chosen a more substantial venue, or if David had a more established career like a doctor, perhaps we could have worked something out." They went on, explaining how they had a fundraiser gala that month, how Dad was being honoured, how their social calendar was full. I sat there with the teacup trembling in my hands, realising that in their eyes, my wedding wasn't worth rearranging. Even a dinner plan for. "I see," I said finally, putting the cup down carefully so they wouldn't see my hands shake. "Thank you for being honest. You've always been so sensitive," Mom sighed. "This is exactly why we worried about you making it as a photographer. Too emotional." I left their house with tears burning behind my eyes, but also with a strange clarity. For almost 30 years, I had begged for their approval, hoped for their pride, prayed for their love, but they would never give it. To them, I would always be less than Emily, less than their idea of success, less than worthy. When I got to my car, I called David. Through tears, I told him everything. "I'll be your family now," he promised, "and my parents already love you more than their actual kids." It was true. From the very first time I met his parents, Carol and Frank, they had welcomed me with open arms. Carol, a retired librarian, and Frank, a high school science teacher, showed me more warmth than my own parents ever had. They asked about my photography with genuine interest, displayed my work in their home, and treated me as if I had always been part of their family. So I decided then my wedding would go on without my parents or Emily. I wouldn't waste another ounce of energy begging people to care. The day finally arrived, June 12th. The sun shone bright. The air was warm but not too hot, and the whole garden seemed to glow as if nature itself was blessing our day. The white chairs lined up under the trees. Wildflowers in blue and purple decorated the aisle, and the arch where David and I would exchange vows looked like it belonged in a dream. Inside, the little preparation room, my best friend Monica was applying my makeup. She knew me well enough to keep it natural, nothing too fancy, just enough to highlight my features. My laced hell-length dress hung perfectly on me, simple, vintage-inspired, easy to move in. "How are you feeling?" Monica asked, brushing a little blush onto my cheeks. "Mixed," I admitted. Happy about marrying David, sad about my parents, angry that I still care whether they're here. "That's normal," she said gently. "But it's their loss. You look beautiful." Just then, Carol, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, entered the room with a velvet box in her hand. "I thought you might want something borrowed," she said warmly. Inside were pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. I wore these at my wedding too. As she helped me put them on, my chest tightened with emotion. "Thank you, Carol. This means so much." She hugged me gently. "We're so happy you're officially joining the family. Though honestly, you've felt like family since the day David brought you home." My Aunt Linda and Uncle Tom drove 6 hours to attend, stepping in to fill the parental roles my own parents had abandoned. Uncle Tom walked me down the aisle, his arm steady as I leaned on him, while Aunt Linda sat in the front row, beaming with pride. The ceremony itself was everything I dreamed of. David's vows made people laugh and cry at the same time. Mine were a little more reserved, but every word came straight from my heart. When the officiant finally pronounced us husband and wife, cheers filled the garden and filled the emptiness left by my parents. At the reception, I noticed guests snapping photos with their phones. Even though we had professionals there, normally, as a photographer, this would have bothered me. But that day, I didn't mind. These were people who loved us, who wanted their own little keepsakes of a day they were truly present for. As the night wound down, I sat at a table for a quiet moment, watching the lights twinkle in the garden. David sat beside me and asked softly, "Happy?" "Completely," I said, though I glanced at my phone more than once. "For what?" he asked. I thought maybe they'd at least send a text. "Just congratulations." David took my hand. "You know what? Let's make a pact. This is the last time today we think about who wasn't here. From now on, we focus only on who was here and who will be here for all our days ahead." Asterisk, asterisk, he was right. I put the phone away and let myself be carried back into the joy of the evening, surrounded by people who chose to be there, who chose me. For the first time, I truly understood family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes, it's the people who show up when it matters most. Later that night, when the reception ended and David and I finally got to our hotel room, I found myself giving in to curiosity. While he was in the shower, I checked my phone one last time. No text, no voicemail, nothing from my parents or Emily. But there were plenty of notifications from social media. Without thinking, I clicked on my mum's profile, which I almost never looked at anymore, and there it was. Photos, dozens of them. Smiling faces, warm beaches, cocktails under the sun. My mum, dad, Emily, her husband, and their kids were in Hawaii. The first picture had been posted 3 days earlier, and they had continued posting all through my wedding day. Pictures of hotel breakfasts, guided tours of pineapple farms, fancy dinners by the ocean. My father even raised a glass in one video, captioned, "2 family priorities." I felt my whole body go cold. They hadn't just skipped my wedding, they had planned an entire family vacation during it. This wasn't a scheduling conflict. This was a statement. They never planned to come. From the moment I announced the date, they already had other plans. I scrolled through the comments, heart sinking further with each one. What a beautiful family. You all look so happy. Perfect grandparents with the perfect family. Nobody asked where I was. Nobody asked why their younger daughter wasn't in the photos. To everyone looking in, it was the picture of a complete, loving family. But I wasn't part of it. When David came out of the bathroom, he found me sitting on the edge of the bed, tears rolling down my cheeks. Without a word, he sat next to me, glanced at the phone, and pulled me close. "They planned it," I whispered. "They planned a vacation during my wedding." It wasn't a conflict. It was deliberate. David wrapped his arms around me as I sobbed into his chest. That night should have been one of the happiest of my life, but instead I cried myself empty. The next day, still shaking, I called my mum. She answered on the third ring, cheerful sounds of laughter and ocean waves in the background. "Rachel, is something wrong?" she asked. "I saw your Hawaii posts," I said, voice tight. "You planned a family vacation during my wedding." "Well, as we told you, we had prior commitments," she replied smoothly. "Emily could only get those dates off, and the kids had activities to work around. You could have told me you were going to Hawaii instead of making it sound like you had separate conflicts," I shot back. "Would that have made a difference?" she asked calmly. "The result would have been the same. We had more important obligations." Those words hit harder than any insult could have. More important, my wedding, my happiness, my life all ranked below a beach vacation. I need to go, she continued. Your father's waiting for me at the luau. I hope your little ceremony went well. And then she hung up. I sat there staring at the phone in disbelief until David gently took it from my hands and switched it off. No more tonight, he said firmly. Tomorrow we start our honeymoon. They don't get to ruin this for us. And he was right. I had already wasted too many years letting their disapproval cloud my joy. Our honeymoon in Quebec was magical. For 2 weeks, we wandered cobblestone streets, ate delicious food, explored old towns, and just existed together. I took pictures for myself, not for clients, capturing small, joyful moments that felt like hours alone. For once, I didn't check social media. I didn't call my parents. I let myself be present, soaking in the love that surrounded me. But real life has a way of barging back in. A week after we got home, I was at an engagement shoot in the public garden when my phone buzzed non-stop in my bag. I ignored it until the shoot was done, then checked it. 7 missed calls from Dad. 3 voicemails. That was shocking on its own. Dad almost never called me, let alone that many times. I sat on a park bench and pressed play on the first voicemail. Rachel called me immediately about the Madison property loan. The second voicemail, left an hour later, was more urgent. This is serious, Rachel. The bank has been sending notices. Call me back. The third one, just 20 minutes old, was full of panic. The loan payments haven't been made. They're threatening legal action. Call me right away. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what this was about. 3 years earlier, back when I was still desperate for Dad's approval, he had asked me to co-sign on a loan for a small commercial building he was investing in. It's just a formality, he had assured me. Your name on the paperwork helps with tax advantages. I'll handle everything. You won't need to worry about a thing. I remember being so ridiculously grateful that he finally included me in something. It was the first time in years he had asked me to be part of his world. Against my better judgment, I signed. David, who I had just started dating then, quietly suggested I get something in writing, but I ignored his advice. I didn't want to ruin my one chance of being trusted by my dad, and now, here I was, holding my phone with Dad's panicked voice filling my ears. I called him back, and he answered instantly. Where have you been? This is an emergency. I was working, Dad, I said carefully. What's going on with the Madison loan? The management company I hired was incompetent, he snapped. The building's been half empty for months, and they failed to inform me. The rental income hasn't covered the payments. But you've been making the payments anyway, right? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I was handling it, but with the Hawaii trip expenses, plus helping Emily with the kids' private school tuition, there were some temporary cash flow issues. I assumed the management company was collecting enough rent to cover at least the minimum. How many payments have been missed? I asked, trying to stay calm. 3, he admitted. The bank sent notices, but they were delivered to the building address, not our home. I only found out when a representative called yesterday. 3 missed payments. My name on that loan. My carefully built credit score now under fire. I need you to transfer $40,000. Dad said in the same commanding voice he'd used my entire life. That'll cover the missed payments and penalties. Then we'll restructure or sell the property. $40,000. I repeated, stunned. Dad, I don't have that just lying around. We just paid for a wedding and honeymoon. Surely. Your business has reserves, he pushed. This is a family emergency. Your credit is at stake too. The irony nearly made me laugh. My wedding wasn't worth attending, but suddenly, my money was family property when he needed it. I need some time to figure this out, I said firmly. I'll call you tomorrow. This can't wait. He barked. The bank is threatening foreclosure by the end of the week. Then it's already waited too long, I replied. I'll call you tomorrow. I hung up before he could say more. Then I called David, then our financial advisor, then a lawyer friend who specialized in real estate. Piece by piece, I learned the ugly truth. Dad hadn't missed just 3 payments. He had missed 5. The first 2 were covered automatically by the reserve fund, but that was now empty. The bank had every right to demand full repayment, plus penalties. If we didn't comply, they could foreclose and still come after both of us. Since we were co-signers, my credit score had already taken a hit, dropping almost 100 points. That could affect everything: our mortgage, credit cards, even future business loans. That night, David and I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and laptops, trying to make sense of it all. I can't believe he let it get this bad before telling me, I muttered, rubbing my temples. And the timing right, after they skipped our wedding for a luxury vacation. It doesn't feel like a coincidence. It's not, David said quietly. The question is, what do we do now? We had options. None of them good. I could use my business savings to cover the missed payments, which would essentially reward Dad's irresponsibility. We could try to force a quick sale, likely at a loss, or we could let it go to foreclosure, which would wreck my credit for years, but might be the cleanest break. I need to know why this really happened, I said finally. Before I decide anything, I need the whole picture. The next morning, I met again with our financial advisor. This time, I asked all the hard questions I should have asked 3 years ago. Together, we pulled full financial records for the Madison property. The truth made me sick. The building had never been the sure thing Dad claimed it was. It had been struggling from the beginning. Worse, every time a little profit built up, Dad immediately withdrew it, instead of keeping it in reserve. The management company had been sending reports, just not to the address Dad claimed, and the most damning part, Dad stopped making payments right around the same time he booked the Hawaii trip. It looks like robbing Peter to pay Paul, my advisor said bluntly. Except in this case, you're Peter. A cold calm settled over me. This wasn't just bad luck. This was my father choosing a vacation with Emily and her kids over his legal obligation to protect me from financial fallout. That night, when I called him back, I was ready. I reviewed the financial records. I began. How did you get those? He interrupted, sounding rattled. I'm a co-signer, Dad. I have legal rights to that information. Why did you stop making payments exactly when you booked the Hawaii trip? That's unrelated, he said quickly. Irrelevant to the current crisis. Have you arranged the transfer? No, I said firmly. What do you mean? No. This affects your credit too. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said calmly. I've consulted financial and legal experts. I know my options. And what are they? He demanded. I'll tell you tomorrow, I replied. I need one more day. This isn't a game, he snapped. This is serious. Yes, I said softly. Just like my wedding was serious, and I hung up before he could answer. I turned to David, who had been beside me through the entire call, holding my hand tight. Are you sure about this? He asked. Absolutely, I nodded. For the first time in my life, I'm going to treat them the way they've always treated me. The next 24 hours were a blur of planning and preparation. I wasn't going to let Dad corner me again without being fully armed with facts. I met with a lawyer to understand exactly what my legal obligations were as a co-signer. I spoke with a credit repair specialist about how to limit the damage already done. I even contacted a real estate agent to get a real estimate on the Madison property, instead of relying on Dad's inflated claims. Piece by piece, the truth unfolded. My parents weren't as financially solid as they pretended. The Madison property was only one of several investments that were struggling. They had taken a second mortgage on their house to help Emily buy hers. They were paying part of my niece and nephew's private school tuition. On top of that, they kept memberships at 2 country clubs that cost thousands every year. Their lifestyle looked polished, but underneath, they were stretched thin. The Hawaii trip, paid for with a nearly maxed-out credit card. Dad's law practice had lost clients to younger tech-savvy firms, and Mum had cut back her hours at the hospital, but not her spending. They weren't broke, but they were overextended, and now they wanted me to bail them out. The same daughter they had dismissed and ignored for decades was suddenly their solution. When I called Dad back exactly 24 hours later, my voice was calm, even. "Finally," he answered, his voice sharp. "Tell me you have the money ready." "I don't," I said simply. "What do you mean, you don't?" His voice rose. "This is no time for petty revenge because we missed your wedding. This is a financial emergency. Be reasonable. Don't contact me about trivial matters," I said, using the exact dismissive tone Mom had once used about my wedding. There was silence on the other end. Then, in disbelief, he asked, "What did you just say?" "Trivial matters," I repeated slowly. "Like loan payments or foreclosures. They're trivial compared to the important things in life. Wouldn't you agree? This is outrageous." He exploded. "Your mother and I raised you better than this. We gave you everything. Except your presence at my wedding," I shot back. "Except respect for my career. Except unconditional love." "That's not fair," he barked. "We've always supported you." "No," I cut him off. "You've supported me when it was convenient. When it didn't interfere with Emily's recitals or presentations or vacations. When I needed you most, you chose Hawaii, and now you expect me to save you." "This is different," he insisted. "No," I said firmly. "You decided my wedding was trivial. I've decided your financial emergency is trivial." He tried again, desperate now. "We'll lose the property. Your credit will be ruined." "I've already spoken to the bank," I told him. "I'm working out an arrangement. I have options that don't involve giving you $40,000. "What options?" he demanded. "That's not your concern," I replied. "Just like my wedding wasn't your concern. You can't do this to us." His voice cracked, with real fear. "Your mother will be devastated." "I imagine she will," I said coldly. "Just like I was when I saw you all smiling on a beach in Hawaii on the day I got married. The difference is, I didn't deserve that pain. You made choices that put me at risk. Now you'll face the consequences." "We're your parents," he said, as if that should fix everything. "Yes," I said softly, "and I've spent 30 years trying to earn your love and approval. I'm done with that. From now on, I'll protect myself first." "You'll regret this," he warned. "Family has to come first." "I agree," I said. "Family should come first. Remember that the next time you choose a luau over your daughter's wedding." And then I ended the call. I sat there for a long moment in silence, then felt David's arms wrap around me. "How do you feel?" he whispered. "Lighter," I said honestly, like I just put down something I've been carrying my whole life. The arrangement I worked out with the bank was unusual but effective. Instead of paying the missed amounts, I negotiated to have my name removed from the loan in exchange for giving up any claim to future inheritance from my parents. My lawyer fought hard, but with my good credit and documented evidence of Dad's mismanagement, the bank agreed. My father would now have to handle the loan himself. If he couldn't, foreclosure was on him. My credit had already dropped. But with help from the specialist, I knew I could rebuild it within a year or two. The most important thing was that I was no longer tied to Dad's reckless decisions. The fallout came quickly. Within a day, I started receiving angry messages from relatives. My Aunt Patricia texted me a long paragraph about how I was abandoning family in a time of need. My cousin Brian left me a voicemail calling me childish and selfish. Even my grandmother, usually the most neutral person in the family, phoned to ask if it was true I had refused to help poor Dad with a temporary setback. Not a single one of them mentioned the wedding. Not one acknowledged that my parents had skipped the most important day of my life. 3 days later, Emily called. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "You need to fix this," she said sharply. Skipping any greeting. "Dad's a mess. Mum won't stop crying. What's wrong with you?" "Hello to you too," I replied. "How was Hawaii?" "Is that what this is about?" she snapped. "You're punishing them for missing your wedding? Grow up, Rachel. Life isn't all about you." The irony nearly made me laugh. My sister, the center of our family's universe, telling me life wasn't about me. "This is about boundaries," I told her. Dad made financial decisions that risked my credit without asking me. Then he expected me to bail him out, right after showing me how little my milestones mean to him. That's not about jealousy, Emily. That's about respect. "We planned that trip for months," she argued. "My schedule is insane. The kids had activities. It wasn't easy. And yet somehow you all managed to coordinate perfectly. For Hawaii, I shot back. Just not for my wedding." "That was different," she insisted. "Yes," I agreed. "One was a vacation. The other was your only sister getting married." Her voice turned bitter. "You've always been jealous. Of me. My success, my family, my relationship with Mum and Dad. This is just another way you're trying to get attention." "I don't want their attention anymore," I said quietly. "I just want basic respect. And if you think I'm jealous of missing out on being second best my whole life, you're wrong." When I mentioned the bank records, when I told her Dad had stopped making payments right around the time the Hawaii trip was booked, her voice faltered. "That's not what happened," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Ask him," I said. "Look at the statements. See for yourself." There was silence. Then, finally, "I have to go. The kids need dinner. We'll talk later." But of course we didn't. Emily retreated into silence, as she always did when things weren't convenient for her. David stood by me through all of it. He never once told me to give in for the sake of peace. Instead, he kept reminding me of all the years I had accepted scraps of attention and called them love. "You're not being cruel," he told me. "You're just asking for the same respect you give them. That's not selfish. That's healthy." And slowly, I started to see that he was right. What surprised me was that a few relatives actually supported me. Aunt Linda, the one who walked me down the aisle, called to say she was proud of me. "Your mother has always played favorites," she said bluntly. "It's about time someone stood up to her." My cousin Megan sent a simple text, "Welcome to the other side. It's lonely, but it's healthier. Call me if you need to talk." Even Uncle George, Dad's brother, who rarely spoke up, emailed me to say he admired how I had built a life on my own terms. Their support was like fresh air after being suffocated for so long. Meanwhile, life moved forward. My photography business grew. I hired a third associate photographer, moved into a bigger studio, and opened a small gallery space. David got promoted to lead teacher at his school, where he developed a new arts-integrated program that his principal called revolutionary. Together, we renovated our condo, making it a real home filled with warmth and personality. We traveled when we could, weekend road trips, new cities, little adventures. We built friendships with people who celebrated us for who we were, not what we could provide for their reputation. In our home, achievements, big or small, were celebrated. Failures were met with encouragement, and love was never conditional. 6 months after I cut ties with the Madison loan, I got a letter from the bank. My name had officially been removed. The property hadn't gone into foreclosure after all. Somehow Dad had scraped the money together. though I never found out how. My credit was already recovering. The worst of the storm had passed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my parents to validate me. I was learning how to validate myself. After the mess with the Madison property, I started therapy. At first it felt strange sitting across from someone and unpacking years of pain I had pushed aside. But little by little, my therapist helped me see things clearly. She told me something I'll never forget. You can't make someone love you the way you need to be loved, but you can stop accepting less than you deserve. Those words stayed with me. For the first time, I stopped measuring myself by my parents' approval. I started looking at my life through my own lens, my thriving business, my marriage to David, the home we were creating together. For the first time, I felt proud, even without their recognition. A year after our wedding, David surprised me with an anniversary trip. He booked a cozy bed and breakfast in a coastal town. He knew I loved photographing the ocean, so he planned a private dinner on the beach at sunset. As we sat there, champagne, glasses in hand, watching the waves crash against the sand, I realized how different I felt compared to the year before. I feel like I've stopped running, I told him. Running, he asked gently. Running to catch up. To be good enough. To earn something that was never going to come, I said. He squeezed my hand, smiling softly. Rachel, you were always enough. I'm just glad you can finally see it now. Things with my parents had settled into what my therapist called civil distance. We weren't cut off, but we weren't close either. Our contact was reduced. 2 short, polite emails or phone calls about safe topics like the weather, the neighborhood, or general news. We didn't talk about my business, their money troubles, or Emily. It was shallow, but it was manageable. And for me, that was progress. Meanwhile, my photography career took off in ways I had once only dreamed of. A well-known wedding magazine featured my work, praising my ability to capture raw, authentic emotion instead of stiff, posed images. That article brought me a flood of new clients, and for the first time, I raised my rates without fear. I could choose which weddings I wanted to take, focusing on couples who cared more about love than show. David was thriving too. His school promoted him to lead teacher, where he designed a program that blended arts with academics. Parents raved about it, and his principal called it groundbreaking. Watching him light up when he talked about his students reminded me every day why I fell in love with him. At home, we started talking about kids. The thought excited me, but it also scared me. I worried about repeating old patterns, about turning into my mother without realizing it. I confessed this fear to my therapist one day, and she reassured me. The very fact that you're worried about becoming her means you won't. You're aware, Rachel. You'll break those patterns because you've already seen the damage they cause. She was right. Deep down, I knew David and I would build a different kind of family, one based on support. Not conditions. Life carried on with a rhythm that felt peaceful until one spring afternoon, I got a call that shook me. My Uncle Tom had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. He had been the one to walk me down the aisle when my own father wouldn't. The thought of not showing up to honor him was unthinkable. The funeral meant seeing my parents and Emily for the first time since the confrontation about the loan. I was nervous, but David held my hand through it. We flew to Chicago, booking a hotel instead of staying with family so we could have space. The service was packed proof of how many lives Uncle Tom had touched. My parents arrived just before it began. Dad looked older than I remembered, his hair fully grey. Mum seemed thinner, more tired. They nodded at me stiffly, but didn't approach. Emily sat beside them with her family in the front row, while David and I sat further back with Aunt Linda. During the reception afterward, I was helping arrange food in the kitchen when Mum walked in. We stood there awkwardly, unsure how to start. Finally, she spoke. "Your photography business seems to be doing well," she said carefully. I saw the magazine feature. I was surprised she even knew about it. Yes, it's been a good year. She busied herself rearranging cookies. On a tray, your father and I are selling the house. It's too big for just the two of us. I'm sorry to hear that, I said cautiously, unsure if she wanted sympathy or judgment. We found a condo closer to Emily's family, smaller, but it suits our needs. She paused before adding, the Madison property sold last month. Not for what your father hoped, but enough to clear the loan. I'm glad it worked out, I said honestly. Despite everything, I didn't want to see them ruined. We stood in silence for a moment, years of tension hanging between us. Then, with a small lift of her shoulders, Mum said something I never expected. Your father and I may have been hasty in our judgment of your wedding. We regret missing it. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I ever thought I'd hear from her. Thank you for saying that, I replied softly. It means something. She nodded. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, David seems like a good man, the best, I said without hesitation. He makes me happy. Another nod, and she picked up the tray. I should bring these out. And just like that, the moment was over. It was small, but it felt like the first crack in a wall that had stood my entire life. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but maybe the start of something a little more honest. 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant. The moment the test showed positive, I ran out to the living room to show David. He lifted me off the floor, spinning me around with tears in his eyes. We agreed to keep the news quiet until the first trimester was over. But the joy in our home was impossible to contain. When the time came to tell family, we invited Carol and Frank over for dinner. Their reaction was everything I could have hoped for. Tears, hugs, immediate offers to babysit and help set up the nursery. Their love filled the room like sunlight. Calling my parents was harder. I expected indifference, maybe even judgment. To my surprise, when I told Mum, she gasped, A baby? Oh, Rachel, that's wonderful news. When are you due? December 15th, I said cautiously. Your first Christmas as parents, she said, her voice softer than I'd heard in years. It'll be magical. We talked for almost half an hour longer than any conversation we'd had in ages. She asked about my health, my doctor visits, even my feelings about becoming a mom. For once, she sounded like she was truly listening. Before we hung up, she hesitated. Your father and I would like to visit after the baby's born, if that's okay with you and David. Her words caught me off guard. It felt like an olive branch, fragile but real. Let's plan for that after the baby arrives, I said. Carefully, we'll see how things go. Of course, she said quickly. Just let us know when you're ready. We can wait. Those last 3 words echoed in my head. We can wait. My parents had never waited for me, never adjusted their lives to fit mine. Hearing them say that felt like something had shifted, even if only slightly. As my pregnancy progressed, I found myself reflecting deeply. I wrote in a journal almost daily, processing fears and hopes. One entry in particular summed it up. I used to think love was something you had to earn through achievements or appearances, but now I know real love means being accepted as you are. My child will never have to earn my love. They'll have it from their very first breath. And with that promise, I felt a piece of myself heal. Pregnancy changed me in ways I never expected. Some mornings I woke up exhausted, unable to even make it out of bed without David's help. Other days I was full of energy, rearranging furniture and sketching ideas for the nursery. Through it all, David never complained. He rubbed my back when the nausea hit, cooked meals when I couldn't stand the smell of food, and held me when the hormones made me cry over commercials. We decorated the nursery in soft shades of sage green and cream, with watercolor animal prints on the walls, and a rocking chair by the window. Carol brought over a quilt she had sewn by hand, each square stitched with tiny stars and moons. Frank assembled the crib, muttering under his breath at the instructions, but smiling proudly once it was finished. Their excitement made me realize something important. This child would never lack grandparents' love, even if my parents were inconsistent. When December finally came, I went into labor late at night. It was long, almost 20 hours, but when our son finally arrived, the pain disappeared in an instant. They placed him on my chest, tiny and warm, his cry filling the room, and I felt my heart stretch wider than I thought possible. We named him Lucas. David cried openly, kissing both me and our son. "You did it," he whispered. "He's perfect." The first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and moments of pure wonder. Lucas had David's dark hair and my nose. When he curled his little fist around my finger, I understood what unconditional love truly meant. Carol and Frank came often, bringing meals and offering to watch Lucas so we could nap. They never overstepped, always asking what we needed, never making us feel judged. Their support was a gift I didn't take for granted. My parents sent a bouquet of flowers with a card that read, "Congratulations. Can't wait to meet him. Love, Mom and Dad." It wasn't much, but it was something. 2 weeks later, they asked if they could visit. I hesitated, worried about stress so soon after giving birth, but eventually agreed. David reminded me we could set boundaries, that we didn't owe them endless hours or overnight stays. When they arrived, I noticed how different they looked. Dad's confidence seemed dimmed, his shoulders less square. Mom carried a softness in her face I rarely saw. They brought gifts: baby clothes, a stuffed bunny, a check tucked into an envelope for Lucas's future. Mom asked if she could hold him. I watched nervously as she cradled him in her arms, rocking gently. "He's beautiful," she whispered. Her eyes glistened with tears, something I had almost never seen. Dad stood beside her, quiet, until he finally said, "You're a mother now. It suits you." For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the parents I had always wanted: warm, present, proud. But it was fleeting. As soon as Lucas fussed, Mom handed him back, shifting into small talk about Emily's children and their holiday recital. Still, I reminded myself, this was progress. I wasn't going to rewrite history in one afternoon, but maybe the future could look different. Over the next year, contact with my parents remained cautious but consistent. They visited a few times, always for short periods. Mum sent texts asking for photos of Lucas, though sometimes her attention drifted back to Emily's achievements. Dad occasionally asked how my business was doing, though it often sounded more like curiosity than pride. I learned to take what they offered without expecting more. Therapy taught me that accepting small efforts didn't mean excusing the past. It meant recognizing limits and deciding what role, if any, I wanted them to play in my life. Lucas grew quickly, filling our days with laughter and chaos. His first word was dog, thanks to our golden retriever, Max, who followed him everywhere. His first steps happened while David was grading papers at the dining table. I screamed so loudly with excitement that I startled both of them. Those little milestones made every sleepless night worth it. On Lucas's first birthday, we threw a small party in our backyard. Carol and Frank came, along with Aunt Linda, a few close friends, and their kids. We grilled burgers, ate cake, and watched Lucas smash frosting into his hair. My parents didn't come, claiming they had a gala to attend. At first it stung, but as I looked around at the people who had shown up, I realized I wasn't missing anything. Family wasn't about titles, it was about actions. One evening, after putting Lucas to bed, David and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. He turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about cutting them off completely? Your parents, I mean." I thought about it for a long moment, Sometimes, I admitted, but then I remember, it's not black and white. They hurt me, yes, but they also try, in their flawed way. And maybe keeping a sliver of connection is better than nothing. For me, for Lucas, as long as it doesn't hurt us. David nodded. That's fair. Just promise me you'll never let them take more than you're willing to give. I promise, I said. And I meant it. As Lucas grew, so did my business. My gallery started attracting not just couples, but also art collectors who appreciated the emotional depth in my photos. I even held my first solo exhibit, showcasing candid portraits of love in everyday life, an old couple holding hands on a park bench, a father twirling his daughter in the kitchen, a soldier embracing his partner at an airport. Each picture told a story, and people connected with them. At the opening night, I stood in the middle of the gallery, overwhelmed by the crowd, when I felt a hand slip into mine. David, smiling proudly, whispered, "Look around, Rachel, you built this. You, not for their approval, not for anyone's, for yourself." Tears filled my eyes because he was right. For so long, I had measured myself by what I lacked. Now, I was learning to measure myself by what I created. A few weeks later, Emily called out of the blue. I hadn't spoken to her in months. "Mom says your exhibit was a hit," she said flatly. "It went well," I replied carefully. "I just wanted to say, congratulations." I was stunned. It wasn't much, but from Emily, it was practically a miracle. "Thank you," I said softly. There was a pause, then she added, "We should catch up sometime. The kids would love to see Lucas." I didn't know if she meant it, or if it was just politeness, but for once, I decided not to overanalyze. "Maybe," I said. "We'll see." After we hung up, I sat in silence, turning the conversation over in my mind. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a thread. And sometimes, threads could weave into something stronger if both sides wanted it. That night, as I tucked Lucas into bed, I whispered, "You'll always know you're enough, no matter what." Saying it out loud was a promise to him, but also to myself. Looking at his peaceful face, I realized the truth I had been chasing all my life. Love wasn't about grand gestures or constant approval. It was about showing up, consistently, even in small ways. My parents had failed me in that, but I was determined never to fail my own child. And with that, I finally felt like I had broken the cycle. By the time Lucas turned 3, our lives had found a steady rhythm. Mornings were chaotic with breakfast spills and missing shoes. Evenings were filled with bedtime stories and bath time giggles. David and I often collapsed on the couch after putting him down, exhausted but happy. I loved our little family. My relationship with my parents stayed cautious, like walking across thin ice. We talked occasionally, mostly about Lucas. They never forgot to send birthday gifts or holiday cards. But the emotional distance remained. I didn't expect deep apologies or sudden change. Anymore, I just accepted what they could give. That acceptance made me feel lighter. One summer, Mum asked if we'd join a family vacation in Florida. The idea made me nervous. Memories of Hawaii were still sharp, but David reminded me that we could set boundaries. "We go if it feels right, we leave if it doesn't," he said. So, we agreed. Florida turned out better than I expected. Emily's kids played with Lucas in the sand, building castles and splashing in the waves. David and I took turns snapping photos of their laughter. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider. My parents watched Lucas with genuine affection, clapping when he jumped into the pool with his floaties. One evening, while the kids watched a movie in the rental house, Dad and I found ourselves alone on the porch. The air smelled of salt water, cicadas humming in the background. He cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally. The words caught me off guard. My father, who had always measured worth in degrees and titles, was acknowledging my success. "Thank you," I said. Cautiously, "I was hard on you," he admitted. "Harder than I should have been. I wanted both my daughters to succeed, but I didn't always see success the same way. You proved me wrong." I sat in silence, letting the weight of his words sink in. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I ever thought I'd get. "I used to think I'd never hear you say something like that," I admitted softly. He looked out at the ocean, his voice low. "I didn't want to admit it, but missing your wedding was a mistake. One of the biggest regrets of my life." My chest tightened. For years, I had dreamed of hearing those words. Now that they were finally spoken, I felt both relief and sadness. Relief that he acknowledged it. Sadness that nothing could change what had already happened. "Thank you for telling me," I whispered. We sat in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that felt like a bridge instead of a wall. Back home, life carried on. Lucas started preschool, proudly showing us his finger paintings and singing songs he learned in class. David and I took turns volunteering at school events, laughing as we watched him perform in his first holiday play. Business-wise, I reached another milestone. A local museum invited me to curate an exhibit of my wedding photography, blending art and storytelling. The opening night was surreal, strangers complimenting the intimacy of my photos, couples thanking me for capturing memories they would treasure forever. To my surprise, my parents came. They walked through the gallery slowly, pausing at each photo. Mom's eyes softened as she studied an image of a father tearing up while walking his daughter down the aisle. Dad lingered over a picture of a groom holding his bride's hand during their vows. When they reached me, Mom touched my arm gently. "Your work, it's powerful," she said for the first time. I believed she meant it. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the quiet gallery with David. "Do you think they finally see me?" I asked. He kissed my forehead. "They're starting to, but the important thing is you already see yourself." He was right. As the years went on, Lucas grew into a curious, energetic boy who loved drawing and building forts out of couch cushions. David and I added another child to our family, a daughter named Sophie. From the moment Lucas met her, he declared himself her protector. Watching them together filled me with a peace I never knew as a child. Our home was loud, messy, and bursting with love. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in the nursery rocking Sophie to sleep, thinking about how different her life would be. From mine, she would never wonder if she was enough. She would never beg for love that should have been freely given. She would always know she belonged. One Thanksgiving, when Sophie was still a baby, my parents joined us for dinner at our house. It was the first holiday they had ever spent with us, instead of Emily. The table was crowded with food: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. Carol and Frank were there too, along with Aunt Linda. At one point, Lucas tugged on Dad's sleeve and said, "Grandpa, come play blocks with me." To my surprise, Dad actually got down on the floor, stacking towers and laughing when they toppled over. Watching them, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe he was trying. Maybe it wasn't too late for him to be a better grandfather, even if he hadn't been the best father. After dinner, Mom helped me wash dishes. "You've built a beautiful life here," she said quietly. "I have," I agreed. Drying a plate, she hesitated, then added, "I hope someday you'll forgive us for the things we got wrong." I looked at her for a long moment. "Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Mom. It's a process, but I'm trying." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "That's all I can ask." Later that night, after everyone left, David and I sat on the couch, holding hands. The house was quiet, the kids asleep upstairs. "Do you think they've really changed?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know that you're not that little girl chasing their approval anymore." You've built something stronger. And no matter what they do or don't do, you'll be okay. And he was right. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for my parents to fill the holes in my heart. I had filled them myself with love, with resilience, with the family I had chosen and created. One evening, while editing photos late at night, I came across an old snapshot of myself at 20, holding a camera at my first wedding shoot. I looked so young, so desperate for validation. Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from pride. That girl had no idea how strong she would become. I whispered to the photo, "You made it." And in that moment, I realized that no matter what my parents did or didn't do, I had finally given myself the approval I had been searching for all along. Time has a way of softening sharp edges. By the time Sophie was in kindergarten and Lucas was in 3rd grade, the old wounds with my parents didn't ache the way they used to. The scars were still there, but they no longer defined me. My parents had grown older, slower. Dad retired from his practice, and Mum cut her hours at the hospital to almost nothing. They spent more time at home, tending to their garden, visiting Emily and her family, and occasionally stopping by our place. Their visits were still careful, never too long, but they were more present than I had expected they'd ever be. Lucas and Sophie adored them in the simple way children do, without carrying the heavy history that I did. They didn't see missed weddings or favoritism. They just saw grandparents who sometimes brought treats and told stories. Watching that innocence helped me let go of some of my bitterness. One autumn afternoon, after a family gathering, Dad lingered behind as everyone else went outside. He sat at our kitchen table, staring at his coffee, and then said quietly, "Rachel, I haven't always been the father you needed." I froze. In all my life, I had never heard words like that from him. I measured success in titles and incomes. He continued, "I thought I was preparing you for the real world, but all I did was push you away. I see now how wrong I was." Tears burned in my eyes, but I stayed quiet, letting him speak. "I can't undo the past," he said, his voice trembling. "I can't give you back the moments I missed, but I hope it's not too late to be here now. For you, for David, for the kids." For a long moment, I couldn't answer. Then I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "It's not too late," I whispered, and I meant it. Forgiveness wasn't instant, and it wasn't total, but it was a choice, made in that moment, to stop letting anger poison the future. Mum softened too, in her own way. She would send handwritten notes, with birthday cards, little updates about her garden, or memories from her childhood. They were small gestures, but they showed effort. And for me, effort mattered more than perfection. Emily and I were still distant, but our kids brought us together from time to time. Lucas and Sophie loved playing with their cousins, and sometimes, while watching them laugh together, Emily and I would share a smile. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something my business reached heights I never imagined. I was invited to speak at photography conferences, mentoring young photographers who reminded me of myself at 20, hungry, insecure, but full of potential. I told them the advice I wished someone had told me back then. Don't measure your worth by other people's approval. Your art has value because it's yours. David continued to thrive at his school, eventually becoming assistant principal. He still came home every night with stories about his students, his eyes lighting up the way they always had. Our love grew deeper, layered with the history we had built together. Years passed. The kids grew taller, smarter, more independent. Our home stayed messy and loud, filled with laughter and art projects and the smell of David's cooking. Sometimes, when I walked through the front door after a long shoot, hearing Lucas playing guitar in his room and Sophie humming to herself while drawing at the kitchen table, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was the family I had always wanted, not perfect, not polished, but real. built on love, not conditions. One evening after dinner, Lucas asked, "Mum, why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa as much as we see Nana and Papa?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "Because families are complicated," I said gently. "But the important thing is, they love you, and you'll always have us, no matter what." He seemed satisfied with that answer, and I realized that was enough. My kids didn't need the full history. They didn't need to carry the pain I had carried. They deserved to grow up free of it. As the years rolled on, I learned to live in peace with my past. My parents had made choices that hurt me deeply, choices that left scars. But they also made efforts later in life to mend what they could. And I chose to accept those efforts, not because they erased the past, but because holding on to bitterness only weighed me down. Looking back now, I see the full arc of my story. I was the daughter who was overlooked, dismissed, treated as less than. I was the bride whose parents chose a vacation over her wedding. I was the young woman whose worth was questioned, whose dreams were belittled. But I was also the woman who built a life anyway, who found love with a man who saw her value from the start, who created a career that turned passion into art, who became a mother determined to break the cycle, to raise children who knew from day one that they were enough. My parents' absence at my wedding used to feel like the defining moment of my life. Now I see it differently. Their absence forced me to stop chasing their approval and start building my own. It was painful, yes, but it also set me free. If I could go back and speak to the younger me, sitting in her car outside her parents' house with tears in her eyes, I would tell her this: one day you'll stop waiting for them to choose you. One day you'll realize you are always enough. And on that day, you'll finally understand what real family means. Because family isn't the people who show up for appearances. It's the people who show up for you. Every time, without conditions, without hesitation. And as I watched David laugh with Lucas and Sophie in our backyard, the sun setting behind them, I know without a doubt I have my family. I've had it all along.